Hi, my name is Anya Revah-Politi. I'm a genetic counselor at the Institute for Genomic Medicine and at the Precision Genomics Laboratory at Columbia University. Thank you so much for having me today. I want to talk to you more about genes and the impact of genes on your health. And also, I'm going to talk to you about my field, which is the field of genetic counseling. So these different discussion points today will be first, what is genetics and what are genetic disorders? What do we mean when we say a condition is genetic or inherited? We'll then talk about genetic tests. Why would somebody get a genetic test? And what are the benefits of testing? What are the downsides, so the risks and the limitations? And then we'll talk about we'll talk about genetic counseling. What is genetic counseling? Why would you see a genetic counselor? And then we'll bring it home with a couple of conclusions. So I'm very excited to talk about these topics. So first of all, what is genetics? So genetics is the study of genes and DNA. DNA makes up genes, and genes are the instructions that tell us a lot about what we look like and also how our body functions. So there's genes that will tell our body how to break down food or how our brain communicates with different parts of the body. All of that is dictated in the genes, and it is the recipe that says how our body is supposed to function. We inherit our genes from our parents, half from our mom and half from our dad. And that's why we look like our mom and like our dad, but we're really not identical to either one of them. Humans are really pretty much identical in their DNA. We are 99.9% identical in our DNA. And if you think about it, this really makes sense. We all pretty much look the same. We all blink the same way, sweat the same way, digest food pretty much the same way, walk pretty much the same way. We're very, very, very similar. The 0.1% that remains is what makes us unique. A lot of it might contribute to our physical differences, and a lot of that variation, the vast majority of that variation, is completely normal and benign. It doesn't cause any health issues. Some variation, though, might increase your risk for some sort of health issue. So, for example, one type of condition that is dictated by genes is multifactorial conditions. These are common conditions that are due to an interaction between genes and the environment. We have a lot of genes that together with environment, and by that I mean lifestyle, so for example, diet and exercise routine, sleep patterns, smoking habits, drinking habits, all of those kind of contribute to whether a condition can develop or not. Examples would include diabetes, hypertension, most cancers, most heart disease are caused by an interaction between genes and the environment. These might appear to cluster in families so that there's a lot of individuals in the family that have these conditions, but this is because individuals of the same family share their genes and often their lifestyle. But if you have a family history of these conditions, it is not a guarantee that you will develop it, and changes in lifestyle may reduce your risks. Other types of genetic conditions have a stronger genetic contribution. These are conditions such as cystic fibrosis or sickle cell disease, when with one or two genetic changes actually pretty much guarantee that you're going to develop the disorder. It's never 100% in genetics, but it's a very, very high risk. And when somebody has a genetic condition like this, the risk of passing it along to their children might be as high as 50%. So when we talk about genetic disorders and genetic condition or inherited conditions, we mean health issues that are caused by changes in the DNA and that may be passed on from parents to children. So changing gears a little bit, why would somebody have a genetic test? And there are some kind of historical reasons why this has been done for a long time, traditional reasons for somebody getting a genetic test, and newer reasons. So more traditional reasons include having a certain medical issue. So for example, individuals with intellectual disability, autism, or who were born with a physical defect or a physical change such as cleft lip and palate or something in the heart, that might trigger a genetic provider or a medical provider to say, genetic testing might be warranted here. Also, if you have different symptoms in different parts of the body in like particular patterns, also that might warrant a genetic test. Or if you have, or a child has a presentation, has a symptom that is atypical in children and common in older individuals, like very high cholesterol or cataracts, for example. That might make a doctor say maybe that child would benefit from genetic testing. Or if you have a lot of people in one family with the same symptom, again, genetic testing might be helpful. Now we're changing a little bit the paradigm, and sometimes people even get genetic testing because they wish to know more about their genes, kind of out of curiosity, not because of something actually going on. That might be, for example, direct-to-consumer genetic testing. Or some individuals might choose to enroll in research studies such as the All of Us research project. All of Us is gathering information from up to 1 million people, and they're sequencing their genomes with the purpose of actually understanding diversity in the US better. Historically, mostly individuals of European descent participated in this kind of research, which means that our understanding of genetic variation is not really representative of what the country looks like. And research projects such as All of Us are trying to bridge that gap. Additionally, if a person who participates in this study wants, they can also learn back about their DNA changes and how their DNA might be impacting their health. So what would be the benefit of getting a genetic test and getting an answer? One, you actually might be able to do something about it and reduce your risks. So you might be able to monitor your symptoms even potentially before they start. Or you might be able to take certain medications or have some sort of intervention that may reduce your risks. Also, the promise of precision medicine. Can we actually tailor your medical care based on your genes? An example of that is pharmacogenomics, for example. We know that individuals with certain variants might process a medication better, or actually they might not respond well to a medication at all. So if we know your genetic profile, we might have a better idea about how to treat you better. Also, identifying a genetic diagnosis might give you access to support groups or access to clinical trials. That might be very good for some people. Also, identifying that you have a genetic disorder might give an idea to the family about whether they're at risk and they might want to get testing. Or some individuals decide to pursue prenatal testing as well. Also, if there is a genetic disorder in the family and genetic testing has been done, and other individuals in the family get testing and they're negative, they become true negatives. That means that their risk is never zero again, like in genetics is never zero, but it's general population's risk. So it actually can be reassuring to get a negative test result. But there's always risks. And one of the risks that we often talk about in genetic counseling is the emotional reaction or the psychological impact of getting a genetic testing result. There's a lot of evidence that getting genetic information might trigger reactions such as anger, anxiety, depression, or guilt. Guilt stemming, for example, from passing to your children a genetic variant that may cause disease. Or it can cause tensions within a family. For example, if there's twins and one of them wants to know and the other one does not, how do we navigate that? Results can be uncertain. You might do a genetic test and get a result that may confuse you even more because it might be of uncertain clinical significance. Or there is a potential risk for discrimination, although I'm going to be talking more about that in the next slide. Limitations include that even if you get a genetic variant, there is no way for us to predict the severity of the disease. Some people actually have very mild presentations and others have much more severe presentations. And if you have from the DNA change, we cannot predict where this is going to go. Also, treatments unfortunately are limited. Not a lot of genetic conditions have treatments available. And finally, there's no perfect genetic test. So if you have a certain symptom and you want to get testing, and the test is negative, it doesn't mean that you do not have a genetic disorder. You might do every test under the sun in genetics, and everything might be negative, and it still does not rule out a genetic disorder. These might be because tests have limitations, but also because we don't know everything about genetics yet. It's a very young science, so we're constantly learning new things. So going back to this issue of discrimination. So there is a law that came out in 2008. It's called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And this law is federal and it prohibits discrimination on the basis of genetic information with respect of health insurance or employment. This means that a medical insurance company cannot discriminate against you, cannot charge you more, cannot cancel your policy or deny an application for insurance based on your genes, based on your DNA variation. Also, your job cannot fire you or not hire you because you have a genetic variant. These laws, however, only go so far. GINA does not protect you against discrimination for life insurance, disability, or long-term care. These three types of insurance actually can use the information from your genes to decide whether you qualify or whether you are a good candidate for their product. So this law is fantastic, but it only goes so far. So this is so much information. This is so much to think about and so much pros and cons, and it's such a new field. And that's where genetic counseling comes about. So I'm a genetic counselor. I'm in this picture on the left when I had straight hair. But so genetic counseling is a process of helping people understand and adapt to the medical, psychological, and familial implications of genetic contributions to disease. So that means that with a genetic counselor, you would sit down and talk about your family history, your medical history, your test results, and together with a medical group that may include a geneticist or a cardiologist, a neurologist, a genetic counselor decides what is the likelihood that actually there is something genetic, like a genetic disorder going on. And if that is the case, they may order testing. Genetic counselors would then sit down with you and explain to you exactly what the test means, the limitations of the results, what you can do with this information, what it means for you and for your family. We're also trained into recognizing the psychological impact of this information and making the appropriate referrals. So just some conclusions. There's a lot of benefits to getting genetic information. There's also risks and limitations. Getting a genetic test result might be very helpful for some, but also might be very upsetting for others. And so therefore, really getting this information is up to you. And it is very important to understand that whenever you are offered a genetic test result, so even if it's by your provider that is saying you might want to consider genetic testing, you have to sign a consent, an informed consent that will tell you that makes sure that your desire to get this information is captured. So you can always say no to genetic testing because we understand that there's a lot of aspects to genetic testing that is not a simple test. This is not like doing cholesterol or so on. Research studies such as All of Us give you the option of obtaining some genetic information, but these do not replace an actual evaluation by a geneticist or a genetic counselor or clinical genetic testing. The same goes for direct-to-consumer genetic testing. This does not replace meeting with a geneticist or meeting with a genetic counselor or getting clinical genetic testing. So please, if you believe that you actually may have a genetic disorder or that there may be something going on in your family, please talk to your healthcare provider so that they can refer you. Thank you so much.